King Frank knelt with reverence. A man, a spiritual follower of a fisherman who lived years ago, placed a crown on the king's head. When King Frank stood up, he was no longer just a king. He had become an emperor. This scene is one of the most well-known events in Western history. The year it took place, 800 AD, is a date familiar to Westerners, much like our familiarity with the year 1453. It encapsulates two iconic figures in European history. The person kneeling in the center of the picture, after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, was Charlemagne, who would restore order and unity to a Europe trapped in centuries of chaos. The one who crowned him was the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, one of his greatest supporters. Now, why is this event so significant? How did popes become powerful enough to crown kings? To understand all this, we first need to delve into the story of Simon Peter, a friend and disciple of Jesus. Jesus was born in Nazareth near Jerusalem under Roman rule, during a time when the Roman Empire was at its height, around the Sea of Galilee. The message he wanted to convey disturbed followers of polytheistic pagan religions, including the Romans. Jesus' message was clear: polytheistic religions were wrong. There was only one true God. His teachings not only unsettled the Romans but also elicited reactions from Jews who believed in the existence of only one God. It's essential to note here that Jesus wasn't introducing a new religion. Describing his purpose and mission as establishing a new religion would be inaccurate. His fundamental intention was to reform and rectify the deviated Jewish faith. However, Jesus' teachings and sermons became unsettling for the Jews over time. They viewed Jesus as a threat to Jewish traditions, considering his words as heresy. Consequently, a profound division emerged between the two perspectives, and Jesus' teachings eventually evolved into a new religion called Christianity. At the time when Jesus preached his beliefs, there was a fisherman named Simon living in the town of Bethsaida near the Jordan River, northeast of the Sea of Galilee. One day, through his brother Andrew, Simon learned about Jesus and agreed to meet him. After this meeting, Simon became one of Jesus' greatest supporters and most loyal disciples. From then on, Jesus gave him the name Peter, and, as mentioned in the Gospel of Matthew, said to him, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." The metaphor of rock, used by Jesus, is crucial, as Peter's name in Greek and Latin means rock. These words of Jesus have been interpreted to signify that Peter would be the representative of the church on earth. Now, what does this have to do with the papacy? Let's try to explain. Years after Jesus spoke these words, Peter was martyred in the Vatican area of Rome by the Roman Emperor Nero. The Roman Church was established in the region where Peter's tomb was believed to be. Traditionally, the Catholic Church considers Peter as the first bishop of Rome, the inaugural pope. The subsequent popes are seen as his successors. Besides being referred to as the spiritual leader, the title and significance of Peter hold a spiritual meaning. Additionally, throughout his life, Peter remained one of Jesus' most loyal and steadfast supporters. According to the Gospels, in an environment where other disciples were present, Jesus asked Peter 3 times, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Each time, Peter responded, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." To which Jesus replied, "Feed my lambs." Many theologians interpret the phrase "feed my lambs" to mean that Peter would become the guide of Jesus' followers after him. This matter goes beyond a spiritual dimension. After Jesus, Peter became the leader of Christians, leading the spread of Christianity to different parts of the world and the establishment of churches in various cities. However, Peter and other apostles faced a problem. Christianity began as a marginal movement and was perceived as a threat to Rome's traditional pagan religion. So, the early churches established by Peter and others had to survive under oppression and threats. Roman emperors, who desired a dominant culture in their territories, viewed this new religion, which contradicted their traditions and emphasized belief in one God, with discontent. Thus, in the early years of Christianity, churches were often clandestinely established and operated. The Roman Church, founded by Peter, was one of these churches. The activities of the early Roman Church, led by Peter, began during the time of Emperor Nero. For Nero, who wanted a dominant culture in Rome, Peter's Christian church posed a significant problem. The emperor saw Christianity as a danger that needed to be suppressed, and soon he gave the order to kill those leading this religion. At the top of the list was Peter. Peter's execution was a great shock to Christians because, among the apostles, the one considered the highest was tortured and killed by the Romans. From that moment on, Peter was seen as a martyr by Christians, and subsequent persecutions continued for some time, occasionally escalating into serious violence. Nevertheless, Christianity continued to spread, both within the borders of the empire and in different corners of the world. In addition to high schools, churches supported by Christian groups emerged in important cities such as Antioch, Alexandria, and Jerusalem. Although the pressure they faced sometimes decreased, the full freedom of churches, especially the Roman Church within the boundaries of the empire, was achieved during the reign of Emperor Constantine I. When Constantine seized power, Christians constituted approximately 10% of the empire's population and began to make their voices heard more. The persecution of Christians and their occasional resistance to these pressures were causing serious unrest in the empire. According to Constantine, who aimed to restore the former glory of the empire, these religious conflicts needed to come to an end as soon as possible. Moreover, the emperor himself had a sympathy for Christianity. In the year 313 AD, Constantine issued a proclamation known as the Edict of Milan, guaranteeing religious freedom for all religions within the boundaries of the empire. Thus, Christians found a suitable environment to practice and spread their faith. Constantine's support for Christians did not end there. He supported the churches established in the empire, including the Roman Church led by the popes, and provided various assistance to them. Pope Constantine I gained respect among Christians due to his stance against the Milanese. Additionally, in the year 325, he presided over the Council of Nicaea, attempting to resolve disagreements among Christians at that time. Constantine was a sensitive man when it came to religious matters. The events the empire experienced in previous years led him to behave in this way. He did not want any religious conflict among his citizens. In matters of religion and philosophy that were not entirely clear to him, he sought the knowledge and experience of Roman bishops, namely the popes. This was an important matter and, on the other hand, a great responsibility for the papacy. Although the papacy had been relatively modest within the empire until this time, it quickly began to develop and feel the need for institutionalization with the emperor's interest and attention. Although Constantine had some disagreements with the popes in Rome, the freedoms granted to Christians by Constantine and the respect shown to the Roman popes strengthened the Church in Vatican, accelerating the spread of Christian belief. Much had changed since the killing of Peter. The Church had now established itself as a significant entity in the Western world. In fact, at this stage of history, the papacy had been officially established, but it had not yet gained the competencies and power it would acquire in the Middle Ages. It would take a few more centuries for that. In the subsequent period, the course of the Roman Church and the papacy was shaped in line with their relations with Roman emperors. About 150 years later, when Rome was captured by the Ostrogoths, a Germanic people, although it temporarily broke the effectiveness of the papal institution, it added another dimension to the institution. When the Ostrogoths captured Rome, Christianity gained significant power, becoming one of the primary religions among the people and nobility. The Ostrogoth kings quickly realized that maintaining good relations with the popes was essential for political power and effective governance. As a result, they wanted to involve the papacy in their power games, and they succeeded to some extent. Due to the oppressive attitudes and ambitions of the Ostrogoths, the church began to be associated with some suspicious corruption during this period. This led to two different results. Firstly, the structure of the church and the papacy had partially deteriorated and became corrupted compared to previous years. Secondly, relations with the Ostrogoths provided the papacy with significant experience in intervening in state affairs. The rule of the Ostrogoths over Rome did not last long, but the political experience that the Roman Church and the papacy gained during this period would last for centuries. Moreover, after this period, popes would play an active role in the affairs of the Western world for centuries. Although the Ostrogoth influence on the papacy ended with the recapture of Rome by Byzantine Emperor Justinian I, the history termed as the Byzantine popes by historians began. During this period, the pope was generally elected by the votes of other religious officials. However, for a pope to be fully accepted, his election had to be approved by the emperor in Constantinople. This situation caused significant delays in the transitions between popes. For example, Pope Sabinianus could only take office 6 months later, and Pope V. Boniface had to wait for 10 years to assume the position. Under the influence of the Byzantine Empire and its culture, a considerable Greek influence began to be seen in the church. During this period, popes were generally selected from regions under Byzantine rule, such as Syria, Greece, and Sicily. This ensured the transfer of some elements from the culture of these lands to the papal office. Rome was in a period of change. Its architecture, language, and literature had become more dominant than Roman culture. Romans started to use more Greek words. In the lower institutions affiliated with the papacy, the Greek influence reached such levels that some texts were initially written in Greek and then translated into Latin for Romans to understand. However, from the mid-8th century onwards, the Byzantine influence on the papacy began to wane. Pope III, Zacharias, who was culturally close to Byzantium, died in 752, and Pope II, Stephen, was elected in his place. At that time, the Lombards, a people coming from the north, had seized Ravenna in Italy and set their sights on other cities in the region. This implied that Rome could also be captured one day. 2. Stephen, who did not want the Roman Church and the papacy to remain under Lombard influence, first sought help from the Byzantine Empire. However, due to wars with the Sassanids and Muslims during this period, the empire, which had become quite weak, could not fulfill the requests of the papacy. Therefore, the Pope left Rome. Crossing the Alps, he appeared before Pepin the Short, the king of the Frankish kingdom, which is now within the borders of France, and asked for help. Pepin the Short was a devout man. Besides, he was aware of the legitimacy that the papacy could provide him. Therefore, he accepted the Pope's offer. Immediately, he sent a letter to the Lombard king Agilulf, requesting him to withdraw from the lands he had taken so far and to end his aggressive policy in the region. However, Agilulf rejected this. After coming to Italy, Pepin handed over Ravenna, as well as Spoleto, Benevento, and Rimini, which he took from the Lombards, to the control of the papacy. This event, which took place in 756, is known as the Donation of Pepin, and with this event, the papacy became an independent state for the first time in history. Pepin received the approval of the Pope in return for this generous act. At this point, obtaining the approval and support of the Roman Church, which was almost entirely Christian in Western Europe, was of great importance in the eyes of the people, nobility, and other kings. In other words, while Pepin secured his position as king by obtaining the approval of the papacy, his diplomatic message to Christian kings was clear and straightforward. The heart of the Roman Church would now beat from the west. After Charlemagne was declared emperor by the Pope, the power of the Roman Church became almost unquestionable among the peoples and nobility of Europe. Being excommunicated by the Pope, meaning the cutting of a person's or a country's ties with the Church, became a problem even greater than losing territory in defeat for a king. Although Europe was divided under the rule of different kingdoms, The authoritative power of the papacy over the peoples and nobility of these kingdoms was indivisible and unquestionable. The spiritual journey of a humble fisherman on the banks of the Rhine River had thus led to the formation and development of Europe's largest and most powerful religious institution.